If you still think experience loses to confidence in a live room, watch what happens when Barack Obama is given 8 seconds and a microphone. By the time the moderator called the break, neither Trump had spoken for 41 seconds. Not Donald, not Barron. The room had produced the specific kind of silence that rooms produce when they have collectively understood something that they will not forget. The silence not of confusion, but of comprehension. The silence of a space in which the balance has permanently shifted, and everyone present knows it has shifted, and is still processing what it means that it shifted here, in this room, in front of these cameras, tonight. Obama had not raised his voice once in the previous 8 minutes. He had not needed to. The scaffolding of the Trump approach, the confidence first, the personal attack second, the volume as a substitute for the argument, had become visible in the room the moment Obama declined to compete with it. And when it became visible, it became insufficient. That is the thing about scaffolding. It holds the structure up exactly until someone shows the room that the structure is the scaffolding. 41 seconds of silence. That was what 17 minutes of preparation had produced. The American Leadership Forum had been designed as a cross-generational conversation. 2 former presidents, 1 current heir apparent, a format that gave each participant equal standing and equal time. Donald Trump had arrived with his opening already decided. This was not a conversation. It was a demonstration. Barron had arrived with the specific energy of someone who has been told his entire life that confidence is the argument, that the room belongs to whoever claims it first, and who had arrived prepared to claim it. Obama had arrived with nothing on the desk except a glass of water and his hands, resting flat on the surface with the loose, settled stillness of a man for whom stillness is not the absence of readiness, but one of its purest expressions. The opening belonged to Trump. He took it with the efficiency of someone deploying a sequence he had run so many times it requires no preparation, only momentum. The forum, he said, existed to discuss leadership, and leadership was the domain of results. And results were a record, and his record was the record of someone who had built more, won more, dominated more than any president in the history of the Republic. He turned to Obama. "Barack," he said. First name, no title, deliberate. "You had 8 years. What did it build?" He turned to Barron, who was seated to his left. "Tell him," Trump said, and Barron did. What Barron said was 22 words. They had the precision of 22 words that had been chosen in advance and rehearsed in a room where they had produced the desired response from the people in attendance. He named 2 economic statistics from the Obama years. He named them accurately. He looked at Obama while he named them. He did not look away. The studio audience produced a sound that lived in the specific frequency between challenge and endorsement. Obama had not moved. His hands were still on the table. His expression had held through Trump's opening and through Barron's 22 words with the quality of a man who is not absorbing what is being said, but reading it. The way a reader reads a text, not for the experience of reading it, but for the structure beneath the surface. He let the silence after Barron's final word run for 3 full seconds. Then he looked at Barron directly, not at Trump, at Barron. "That was a performance," he said. His voice was at the level of conversation, unhurried, specific, carrying the weight of language that has been selected rather than produced. And it was convincing. 1 beat. But performances end. Another beat. And this conversation is just starting. He reached for nothing. He had no documents. He had his memory and his record and the specific authority of a man who has spent his adult life in rooms where the stakes were real and has learned that the rooms that matter most are the ones where preparation is invisible and only the thinking remains. He looked at the economic statistics Barron had cited. He named them again, the same figures precisely. And then he named the figures that preceded them. The unemployment rate he had inherited in January 2009, the GDP contraction in the quarter before he took office, the specific economic conditions that the statistics Barron had cited existed within, not as a defense, as context. The difference between a number and its context is the difference between a scaffolding and the structure it is supposed to be holding up. He named the context the way a carpenter names a measurement, with the flat, specific authority of someone who has been in the space for a long time and knows what the numbers mean in 3 dimensions rather than 2. Trump interrupted. His voice arrived at the specific elevated register of a man who has sensed that the room is moving and is using volume to reverse the direction of the movement. He said the context was an excuse, that leaders do not cite the conditions they inherit, that the only number that matters is the one you produce and not the one you blame. His voice was large and certain, and it filled the available space the way his voice always fills available space, completely, by default, as if the filling were itself a form of argument. Obama let it finish. He waited with the patience of a man who has learned that patience is the only tool that volume cannot address. That when a man is using volume as an argument, the correct response is not more volume but less, because less is what reveals the absence at the argument's center. When Trump's voice had finished filling the space and the space had gone quiet again, Obama looked at him. "You keep saying this is fake," he said. His voice was quieter than anything he had used in the broadcast to that point. "So prove it!" He held Trump's gaze. "Right now." He let a beat hold. "In front of everyone." Trump's jaw shifted. His right hand moved off the armrest. He began the sequence, the restatement, the credential, the personal diminishment, the dismissal. And it arrived the way it always arrives, with the efficiency of long practice and the confidence of a man who has never had to defend it in a room that was ready. But Barron had gone quiet, and the room noticed. The room always notices the person who has gone quiet, because in a room where someone is performing, the person who has stopped performing is the story. Barron's eyes had moved from Obama to the table in front of him. His hands, which had been positioned with the deliberate confidence of a man who had arrived prepared to occupy a chair, had shifted. A slight, involuntary adjustment, the hands moving closer together, the fingers closing in the specific way of hands whose owner's certainty is being examined rather than confirmed. He was looking at the table. Obama had not looked at him again since the first 8 seconds. That was the line. "You taught him how to stand in your shadow." Obama had said it at the end of his response to Trump's sequence. Not loudly, not with emphasis. In the same conversational register he had used throughout, the register of a man making an observation rather than an attack. His gaze had moved from Trump to Barron and held there for 1 second, not with hostility, with the specific, unmistakable patience of a man who has seen this before, who has watched this specific dynamic play out in rooms across a career, and who has waited until the room could see it too. "You taught him how to stand in your shadow." And then he had looked back at the moderator and waited for the next question. The room had gone quiet. Not the silence of a room that has been surprised, but the silence of a room that has been shown something it already knew and had not yet found the language for. Trump's voice came back immediately, louder than before. The sequence restarted from the beginning, the credential reasserted, the dismissal reissued, the argument refilled with volume. And it was unconvincing for the first time in the broadcast, not because the words had changed, because the room had changed around them, and the words were the same shape they had always been, and the shape was now visible in a way it had not been visible 11 minutes earlier. Barron did not look up from the table for 41 seconds. The moderator called the break. The cameras, which had been covering the exchange, held on the 3 faces, Trump, Obama, Barron, for the duration of the call. Trump's voice was still producing words. Obama's hands were still flat on the table, the same position they had been in since the beginning. Barron was looking at the table. A camera operator in position 2 held her lens on Barron's face for the full 41 seconds and did not adjust. What she saw in those 41 seconds was not defeat in the political sense. It was something smaller and more permanent, the specific expression of a young man who had arrived somewhere prepared for one kind of room and found himself in a different one and had not yet developed the vocabulary for the distance between them. By morning, the clip had crossed 52 million views. The 8-second response, "You taught him how to stand in your shadow," had been extracted and posted on 27 platforms as a standalone clip. The 41 seconds of Barron's silence had been reproduced in full on 3 network broadcasts. No commentary. The silence was the commentary. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications. The next confrontation is already building. And once you see what's coming, you'll understand why silence is always louder than power.